Good afternoon and welcome back to My Harlem Portraits, the show that aims at shedding a light on the fundamental contribution of African Americans to the building of this country and on Black excellence. To represent Black excellence today, we have a very important guest who was this year the recipient of the 2024 Lifetime Achievement Awards, the Audelco Awards. And his name is Dean Irby. Welcome to My Harlem Portraits, Mr. Irby.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So you have an amazing career which has spanned over 50 years in New York theater world and beyond that. You are a native of Jamestown, New York, moved to New York City in 1971, and you began your graduate studies at NYU School of the Arts after having attended HBCU Dillard University in New Orleans and a 2-year stint in the US Army. So let's start from the beginning. Let's start from New Orleans, where you were a founding member of the Dashiki Project Theater and worked closely with the Free Southern Theater. Tell us, what was this project about and your years in New Orleans?
Well, I went to New Orleans from Jamestown, having been born and raised in Jamestown, which is a small town of about maybe 40,000 in upstate New York, in the southwest part of New York State. Um, I ended up, but my brother went to Dillard, and as a matter of fact, all the males in my family ended up in New Orleans. My brother went to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. He ended up staying and going to school, going to Dillard. My oldest brother, he went down the next year for Mardi Gras, and he stayed, and he never came back. He never came back. So 10, 11, 12 years later, I come along, I graduate from high school, and I'm looking at colleges, and I didn't get into the school that I wanted to, but I had Dillard as a backup, and I ended up, going to Dillard, following my brothers, right? After me, my nephew, Chauncey Gilbert, he ended up in New Orleans at Dillard University, and later came to New York and is a New York actor also. But while I was in New Orleans, those years, you're talking about the mid '60s, and so there was we're right after the Freedom Summer of the Civil Rights Movement, and I became acquainted with a number of people who were involved in that and involved in the civil rights movement. And they really acclimated me to the South. Though I had been to the South, everyone in my family was born in Alabama except me.
Oh, wow.
When I came along, there's 11 and 13, 12 and 13 years difference between me and my siblings. There's 1 year difference between them because they're twins. And so my oldest brother was born, and then a year later came two others. I came 11 and 12 years later, 12 and 13 years later. So I was the runt. So going to New Orleans, and really getting to know a lot of folks that were involved in the civil rights movement, um, I it it showed me a whole nother world than what I was used to in Jamestown, obviously. In my graduating class in high school, there were 600 there were 6 blacks out
Oh,
of 600. So that gives you a
yes.
framework from whence I came. Um, the Free Southern Theater was like the artistic arm of the civil rights movement.
Okay.
And they would, along with voter registration drives and things like that, they were out in the middle of nowhere producing plays. And so I came along after all of that action, but now they were located in New Orleans and they were producing plays in New Orleans. So um, my association with them was in New Orleans and producing and working with them there, along with another theater company that I was a founding member of, the Dashiki Project Theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, now that theater was a spinoff from the Dillard's Players Guild. The Dillard's Players Guild was the on-campus theater organization.
Mhm.
But a lot of the alums and a lot of people in the city would come and they would be in some of the plays that we would do there. So what they decided to do is to create another theater company that would comprise the alumni and other folks in New Orleans. So that's how the Dashiki Project Theater came about. Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright was one of the first plays that I did that, and it was very interesting that I was just at the Alvin Ailey exhibit at the Whitney, and that was I think that was one of the first plays that Alvin did on
Wow.
Broadway, and we played the same roles, as a matter of fact. But that was and that really began to acclimate me and make me fall in love with theater, because I had no interest or initially of doing that.
Yeah, that's incredible. That sounds very interesting because you have put together the experience of the freedom riders and the freedom movement with theater. And so it must have been a very interesting time, an interesting
Oh,
experience.
it was very, I mean, the fact that those people that I became familiar with helped us put together what we call the Festival of African American Arts.
Huh.
And that was the first one we did was in 1967,
Mhm.
and then we did one the following year, and we were able to bring in resource people from all over, very well known, Imamu Baraka, who was then
Wow.
Leroy Jones, the staple singers, Max Roach, Abby Lincoln, uh,
Wow.
John Oliver Killens. I mean, a lot of really, really wonderful resource people, noted people from all over the country. Um, and um, and Free Southern Theater was also a part of that.
That,
So that sort of, you're right. It pulled together my artistic bent
yeah,
along with my political activities.
which is always the perfect combination.
Absolutely.
Let's go now to NYU. At NYU, Tony Awards winner Lloyd Richards, who in 1959 became the first African American director on Broadway, was the head of the School of the Arts, and he was your first acting teacher. And I know that you credit him as starting you on your professional journey. Tell us a little bit about that and that experience.
Well, before I got to NYU, I got drafted.
Oh, wow.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I was scheduled to start NYU in the fall of September of 1969. This is the height of the Vietnam era.
Yep.
And I was drafted. Actually, my draft notice had been waiting at home in Jamestown all summer long. And I had not gone home. I had not checked in with my parents. And I didn't find that out until August.
Wow.
And I had less than a month to try to get out of the draft. And I couldn't. I couldn't. And long story short, I ended up spending 2 years in the Army, mostly in Georgia, in Fort Benning, Georgia.
Mm. Thank God you
Uh,
didn't have to go to Vietnam.
right. Well, yeah, that was I was, I was there, right there with people who were being trained. We were all being trained to go to Vietnam, and fortunately for me, I was not selected. Uh, but that time was also very interesting, both artistically and politically, because I had a miserable time in the Army. I was a terrible soldier. I had a miserable time. And the one thing that really saved me, that I found some kind of solace with, was acting. And then I didn't know that that would be a possibility, but um, they were doing a production of West Side Story
Wow. In the Army?
in the Army. There
Wow.
was there was a, and I had finagled my way into my permanent duty. My job in the Army was to sing in the chorus, the Army
Wow.
chorus,
Not bad.
you
Excellent
know.
job.
And so the director of the chorus of West Side Story was in the chorus, so he pulled a lot of us into doing West Side Story. So that started me, and then after that, there was a Army third Army tournament of plays, and the Third Army was like a whole section on the eastern seaboard of Army base Army forts, and they had decided our fort had decided to do Blues for Mr. Charlie, James Baldwin, and I was casted in the lead role.
Wonderful.
Um, and I ended up getting the Best Actor award for for that production, the Third Army, and that was really the only medal, quote,
Mhm.
medal that I
That you
received
got
in
from
the
the Army.
Army. But towards the end of my 2 years in the Army, I had been accepted to NYU.
Good.
In fact, Sorette Scott, who's a noted actor and director, she was at NYU, but she was taking a leave of absence, and she was asked by the school to round up some people in New Orleans, where she was now as a member of Free Southern Theater. She was asked to put some people together to audition for the School of the Arts.
Okay.
I went to accompany my friend, and they asked me, Israel Hicks, as a matter of fact, was who was still a student at NYU, but he was going on the audition tour. They asked me if I was going to audition, and I said no, no, I was just with her. And they said, "Well, do you act?" I said, "Well, yeah." They said, "Well, why don't you audition?"
Mm.
I had nothing prepared. I reached in my pocket somewhere, the pockets of my mind, and I pulled out a ditty that Oscar Brown Jr.
Mm-hmm.
It is called Signifying Monkey. And that was the only thing that I could think of doing right there. And
Remember.
I would do that as a joke,
Mm.
because it was a signifying song, right?
Mm.
And I did that. And I later on I said, wow, how crazy was that? I'm auditioning for an acting conservatory. They're doing Shakespeare, they're doing, they're doing Chekhov, they're doing all of this stuff, and I'm doing Oscar Brown Jr., right? But as it happened, Uh, I was thinking I was going to go to law school,
Mhm.
but as it happened, about a month later, they contacted me and they offered me a slot in their program.
Fantastic.
And I had never had a single class in acting before that.
Wow.
I had been in a lot of plays,
You were
but I
acting.
never had any formal training.
Yeah, but you were acting already, so.
True that, true that. But here I am going to graduate school in acting, you know.
And
So anyway,
tell,
uh,
tell us about the your director, Lloyd Richards. Tell us about his influence there.
right. So Lloyd was the head of the department at NYU.
Mhm.
I got drafted. I had to go in, did those 2 years. At the end of those 2 years, I contacted Lloyd, who at that point I'd never met. And I asked, can I still come to NYU? And he said, sure, come on. You know, so out of the Army, I came up to New York and I started my classes. Lloyd, I had two acting teachers. I had Lloyd and a man named Peter Cass. And it's just ironic that, as you said, Lloyd was the first African American director on Broadway with Raisin in the Sun,
Mhm.
Lorraine Hansberry,
Nothing else than that.
right? And Peter, who was white, Peter directed Lorraine's other Broadway show, Sign in Sidney Bernstein's Window.
Oh my
And
God.
so I had the two directors of Lorraine Hansberry, as my initial acting teacher. And once again, let me emphasize, I had never had any formal training. At the end of my first week at NYU of working with Lloyd, all of a sudden, they're throwing all these things at me, at the theater games and things like that, trust games. Um, my political uh, um, stance at that time left me not really trusting white folks too
Mhm.
much, right? I'm coming out of the South, and we have been involved in some very, very interesting activities. So I didn't think I was that this was the right fit for me. I
Mhm.
remember coming home to my East 15th Street basement apartment, which was about this big, and thinking, I don't know if I can do this, and I wrestled that whole weekend, did not go out that whole weekend, and with the idea of can I stick with this? Can I go through the rigors of this kind of training? I was ready to go back to law school, or go to law school, not back to law school, but go to law school. But that Monday morning, by that Monday morning, after wrestling with it, I said, let me give it a try. It's
Yeah.
a new area for me, and let me go for it. And I'm so grateful that I did do that because that got me really embedded in the training. Um, Soon, about halfway through that semester, I realized that I wanted to direct.
Wow.
Never had directed before in my life.
Well,
But
you were doing new stuff, so you decided why not?
yes, yeah, exactly,
Told
exactly,
you.
exactly. So I went to Lloyd, who was the head of the program, and I asked him if I could change my major to directing, and what did he think about that? Well, Lloyd, in his infinite wisdom, he knew I didn't know that much about acting, other than my intuitive acting. Um, so he said, "Why don't you attack the directing through the acting program?"
Good idea.
That was one of the wisest advice that I'd ever received. To give you an idea of how little I knew about acting, the very first scene that I had in Lloyd's class was a scene from Ed Bullen's In New England Winter.
Mm.
And I had a scene partner, and we had rehearsed and did all of that. And I went into the class and I had the first line, and the first line might have been 3 sentences long. And I said my line, and before I could finish those 3 sentences, Lloyd stopped me. He said, "Where are you coming from?" I had I came from right over here. I I had no idea. He said, "Where are you going?" Yeah. So he asked me all of these real simple questions, and I gave all of these stupid, simple answers.
I'm going for dinner afterwards.
You know? But that was how little I knew. And I mean, most of my fellow students, they were grad students, I mean, they had undergraduate classes in acting. So they all knew.
Yeah.
They all knew the language, and I didn't know the language,
Yeah.
So that I started at zero,
Ground zero.
Yeah, yeah. But so there go, that was my beginning, and my whole tutelage with Lloyd.
Wow, that is very important. When you find someone, a tutor or someone who is guiding you in that way, I think it's one of the most important things that you can have, especially at that age, because if you have a wrong one, it can put you on a path that is not yours, and it would be terrible.
You're absolutely, absolutely. If I jump ahead a little bit, to where I am now at Purchase College, teaching at Purchase College, how I got there, we can go back. But just jumping off of your point, they used to have a system where it was a kind of mentorship system. And so that the students for all 4 years of the conservatory at Purchase, all 4 years, they had the same acting teacher for all 4 years. So it was taken after a pattern of, say, the actor studio, Lee Strasberg, Uta Hagen, and so like a lot of those teachers came out of that system. So it was a whole thing of having that kind of guru, and following that one methodology. But if you did not happen to get along with that teacher, or their methodology did not suit you, you were stuck as an actor. You were stuck.
And you couldn't change?
Pardon?
You couldn't ask to change?
Oh yeah. Well, it changed years later. Years later, that whole system, was abolished. But in my case at NYU, I was very fortunate, to have Lloyd and to have Peter, in those positions.
So let's get to what became your home theater, the Negro Ensemble Theater. You started with the Off-Broadway, Broadway, and national touring companies of Joseph Walker's The River Niger. And then your acting career continued and includes, among others, the production of the Public Theater, the New Federal Theater, La Mama. How did this bring you to win 2 Audelco awards in that period?
Well, that's over a span of years, obviously. But while I was still at school, NYU was on Second Avenue. Negro Ensemble Company was on Second Avenue, just a block and a half away. And the East Village, I mean, that was a very vibrant hotbed of activities. You had the Public Theater, right around the corner. You had La Mama down the street, the Players Workshop. All kinds of theaters, were right there in the vicinity. I lived right up on 15th Street, off of Second Avenue. So everything was happening right there. And I was coming from school one day, and I heard these footsteps behind me walking very fast. And I just got a sense that they were coming to approach me, though
Mhm.
they were behind me. And so I was getting ready to um and I turned around quickly, and it was Douglas Turner Ward,
Oh,
who was
wow.
artistic director of Negro Ensemble Company. And Doug um approached me, and he said, I want you to come in and audition for me for a play right there on the street. I had met him before. Of course, I had met him before, and I had seen things at NEC, and I was hanging around there a little bit because it was right there in the neighborhood. So I went in and I auditioned for the River Niger, and got the part.
You
And
seem to have been, during all your career, at the right time, at the right moment, and without even wanting that.
right.
I mean,
Yeah,
most people try.
to be absolutely honest, I have really been blessed that way, of 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 things happening that I
You weren't
didn't
searching.
plan on. I didn't really work hard initially to
Yeah.
get. I worked hard afterwards,
Yeah.
for sure. Um, and conversely, those things that I worked the hardest for, I never got.
So maybe you shouldn't work hard to get
I,
things.
you know,
Let it happen.
I hate to admit that that might be true, but
You just have to
um,
let it happen.
yeah. But I found myself in the first day of rehearsal for River Niger, in the company of Francis Foster, Roxy Roker, Graham Brown, Charlie Weldon, all of these people that I had, revered, even
Oh,
when I was at Dillard in New Orleans. And here I was, in the rehearsal room with, all these wonderful, wonderful actors. And they began to refer to me as schoolboy because I was still in school. Um, and I would do my exercises very diligently now.
you had to.
But that was the beginning of that. So the show um opened, and it kept being extended and extended. And then we got the notice that we were moving to Broadway. And so
Wow.
and I was playing one role, one of the gang members, but I was understudying the young male lead the whole time. And so when the show was going on the road on the national tour, Doug asked me if I would want to step into that role. So the show was still running on Broadway, but I went out, and he was going out on the tour. He was playing the lead, and I was playing his son. And so, like, we went out on the national tour, and that was a great learning experience, especially playing opposite him.
Fantastic. And what about the two Audelco? What did you win the two Audelco for? And we
Well,
don't have much time. We need to be concise.
oh, okay. Um, I the after River Niger, folks at NEC, especially Steve Carter, who was head of the playwriting division. They knew I was interested in directing. I'd never directed before, but I was interested. So they offered me a show to do a show. It was called No Place to Run, No Place to Hide. And we did that show on this little tiny box, stage, with I had a lot of big people. They were, I mean, physically big, and they were
Yes.
all on this poster set. But that was my first introduction to directing. Um, And then from that point on, it was a kind of New York, I mean, it was very fertile territory for theaters. I was doing a new play every 3 weeks.
Wow.
I was,
Oh
every
my
2 weeks, every
God.
3 weeks. And
That is
I didn't
incredible.
want to go back to school to learn, so I learned by, trial by fire. And I was doing a play for New Federal. Um, well, before that, I was doing play Home at and Negro Ensemble Company, which just had its was revised last year on
Yes.
Broadway. I
That's
did not go to Broadway with the show. That was my quote unquote New York story, my New York horror story.
Mhm.
But I did do the original production of Home by Sam Art Williams. And then the other play at New Federal was Boogie Woogie and Booker T.
Mhm.
And had some fantastic actors in that. Ruben Santiago Hudson, uh,
Wow. I love it.
Latanya Richardson, Marie Thomas, some really, really, really great cast on that. But that was by Wesley Brown. And we got another Audelco for that, for directing.
You got Audelco for that.
Yes.
Wonderful. Good. All right. So we have to go really fast. We have 1 minute. So your directing credits also include Off-Broadway and touring company of One More Times,
Mhm.
staggeringly several productions at the Frederick Douglass Creative Arts Center in Crossroad Theater Company. And then most recently you had Sugar Belly and Other Tales My Father Told Me.
Mhm.
In 86, you began your teaching career at Borough of Manhattan Community College and the College of New Rochelle. And then you went on to Hunter College. And then you arrived to Purdue, where you are currently teaching.
Mhm. Yeah.
So all this to say that your career has embraced many different areas. And this is one of the reasons why you were successful in all of them. You got the 2024 Audelco Awards Lifetime Achievement.
Well, before that,
Mhm.
earlier this year, as you
Yeah.
recall, I was honored in North Carolina at the International Black Theater Festival, where
Festival.
they gave me the Lloyd Richards Directing Award, which was that really, really got to me to go full circle around and to get that award named after, my
Your
my teacher.
teacher.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. This is really, you really, it's really very interesting to see how many people really struggle to get the things they want. And then someone like you got into them without even wanting it. And it happened to me too. The things I didn't really look for, they just fell on my plate. And when
Mm,
I really wanted something, obstacles. So maybe,
mhm.
I don't know. But this is, thank you so much for this interview, because we need really to see the importance of the Black theater in 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 New York and in this country in general. Thank you.
You're welcome.
My
Pleasure.
wishes, and I'm very happy for you to have earned all these awards. And thank you, our viewers. See you next Saturday, 12:30 p.m. on Spectrum. And if you want to see other episode, look on YouTube. My my Harlem Portraits. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, and bye-bye.